Hello, here we are again. So this will be kind of quick, only because we're still kind of a little bit in setup. We're setting up, at least now, that the two sides, Redwall Abbey and Cluny, have kind of at least encountered each other, and then we'll have the real kind of meet up in the next chapter, which couple of chapters, which will be more in depth. Um, There's a couple things to note. So we're in chapters again 5 through 8, and so there are a couple quick things. One is, of course, we have in chapter 6, we have the cart that was carrying Clooney and his horde crashing, and clearly Clooney does not care about his um, servant rats. He doesn't care about like them individually. He might have a certain preference for a certain general or leader or something, but other than preference, there's really no care or love or attention. This will be a common theme among most of the Redwall villains, is kind of just utter disregard for their crewmates and armies and such. This will not always be true. There are certain pirates that kind of have a band or loyalty, or at least have some sense of like, even if it's not care, like some sort of kind of at least like, I'm a general and supposed to lead these groups, and it kind of matters. Clooney has a little, is on the one side more on the spectrum of so long as I get what I want, I really don't care what happens to everybody else. Um, so yeah, that's kind of Clooney's main big takeaway in chapter 8, because there's not much else. The cart crashes. They find Saint Ninian's church. Again, the church thing is again weird. This has been commented by a few people online as I was looking around for people who might be interested. And this was and kind of looking into things, and this was a common kind of comment, was the whole poor angle, which I saw was a good point. There were a couple of people in my Redwall fan club. So if you go over to, I think it's Meredith, I'll be sure to link her in the description for her fan club on Discord if you want to get more. But that was common interest, was kind of the church angle and the poverty of the church mice. Yeah, definitely a strange thing. Doesn't really come up again. Um, so it's definitely something to look at in the future too. Is kind of like, what's the relationship between Redwall and the other surrounding creatures? This will be a kind of interesting angle that doesn't really get explored probably as enough as it should. On, is there, how much give and take is there between Redwall and all the animals outside of it? Why do certain animals live, say, at St. Ninian's Church or in Mossflower Wood, but don't live in Redwall because they're always seem to be food for everyone? So it's kind of interesting. It could be an independence thing. It could be actually not as much food as we actually think. It just appears that way just because that's what gets highlighted in the books. There are a couple odd things. So uh, that's just an interesting point that was brought up in the fan community, um, that I saw people were talking about, which is definitely interesting. But again, like sometimes I think with some of these things that aren't explored, I'm really not that interested. Like the economics of Redwall, I mean, it's kind of maybe wish we explored more, but not really. I really kind of don't care about kind of the economics and how all this works and the give and take between Redwall and Oswald. There'll be some hints to this, but I don't think it's worth getting into because it's just not an aspect of these books. Question, and this is kind of a thing to look at when examining these books, is kind of what is, do they do effectively what they're doing? And so you kind of wish maybe at times they did more with certain things. Um, but at the same time, are they effective in what they're just focused on, which is being fun adventure books? And so I think sometimes, um, with Redwall at least, it's just not a priority in Brian Jacques' mind. I think you just want to create a fun adventure series. So the economics is just one not, and the makeup of how that all works doesn't quite touch on things, and it's never addressed in the series. So it's interesting, but maybe there's like just some fun speculation about that, and there's always, of course, there's always going to be fan theories surrounding a lot of this stuff, but I don't really see the point. But um, the the interesting thing I find that that this said chapters touches on is because so they encounter Cluny on their way back. By the way, I do like the funny little exchange between Colin Vole and I think it's brother Rufus. I'm trying to remember, was it brother Rufus about Cornflower Matthias and like brother coming to, it's like Colin was trying to make some joke about them being a wig couple and like brother Alf just shoots him down after and that he's playing a double standard because he's like has a crush on somebody. So uh, yeah, I found it. I found that really funny. Colin is. I don't remember Colin being in Matameo, which is really weird. We're gonna get to that, but it's strange that Colin nor Mr. Bankful are ever mentioned again. I don't think in the series, or Mr. Bankful is mentioned. Maybe he is. Try and remember. Gosh, I'll do, I'll have to get to it when we get to it. It'll be a while, but can't remember if Colin's mentioned again and if the husband is mentioned again, which is odd, especially considering what happens in Man Mayo. But we'll get to that. So let's see here. Um, what else? So they get the cart and they immediately turn back. Um, Constance has the good sense of getting out the road. Matthias is actually, we see kind of Matthias's skill here and kind of at least being very ready to take charge. So we see that, which is really good because he's the one willing to lead, and he kind of says, "God's." I found it a little slightly. I think he meant it somewhat jokingly, but I thought it was like, "Your Constance is slow-witted. Not in this series. I don't know what you're talking about, Matthias." But I did like him taking charge, and it's very clear that he also has a clear sense of like, despite his awkwardness and his kind of clumsiness, he does have a good idea for detail. He remembers like what exactly what Cluny looks like, but it's hard not to miss what Cluny looks like. But still, he kind of gets all the details. And it's important that he does because um, it's important for identifying who Cluny is. So, so the two main things are going to be the discussion around who Cluny is, and this is where it gets a little odd because Cluny has a reputation, um, and it's like, where does this come from? Like, I understand that there's stories, like they get to Brother Methuselah and he sends stories. I don't quite understand like how Cluny got this big a reputation, especially considering how maybe later how small Redwall kind of scenes. Like they're so unaware of like certain things later that it kind of seems very strange. Um, I don't know. It's just why Cluny in particular. I guess it's because he's the largest rat. Um, there's a reference to a mine, which I also found weird. Now again, that goes into fan speculation, but why a mine? You know, have a mine. Why? That's a little odd. And then, of course, all the references to farming and like human settlements and like a settlement catching fire. It's like, and it's clearly almost talking about like a human settlement. And it's really weird. So again, this is kind of the strange thing about this first book is how connected it is to the real world as opposed to much later. I think this is, and like, I don't want to get into, again, is it fun to compose fan theories about this stuff? Yeah. But I think um, that, um, again, we're losing sight of things which are just pretty obvious, which is, I just, like, some fan theories are fun because I think there's stuff to build on. This one, I think it's just mostly that Brian Jakes wasn't really thinking about this very much. Very clearly, especially in context with the rest of the books, that he wasn't really thinking very clearly. I do think it really interesting that foxes kind of get a somewhat good reputation, at least in the first thing, because he talks about wandering foxes being like foxes, so it's like almost like foxes are less bad overall, so it's kind of weird. Um, Even though it's not going to really prove the case at all anywhere else in the series, so it's kind of weird. Um, the reference to wandering foxes is one of the stranger ones to me. In terms of main sources that Methuselah has. Um, yeah, so the reputation of Cluny, it's definitely very reminiscent of some things where like the myth become fact kind of idea, which is common in a lot of fantasy stuff. Is a lot of people, oh, that thing is a fantasy, it's not really real, and Cluny is real. So it's kind of interesting, also, like again, how did Cluny get this reputation so quickly and so soon, but still him be a legend? Um, Again, it's kind of odd considering the world of Redwall moving forward. And again, I just think a lot of this is just Brian Jakes not really being precise at this point. Um, and so this is kind of where um I always find this one of the reasons why, while I like Redwall overall as a book on as a book and still holds up as having a lot of great things in the series, and because it's early, it's still bring all that stuff fresh and new to you. This is why it's not in my top, I want to say, 5 books, is because of this kind of like very clear um, sense that Brian Jakes is really still kind of wrestling with the world and how much he wants to indulge in kind of a a grander human world surrounding this versus just being almost a separate world altogether. And because it's only going to come up more in relevance again one more time, and we'll get to that. I mentioned that in the first episode, but I just think this is just him being, I don't want to say sloppy. It's just he just th- thought this might be a cool idea in his first book, and he just didn't really do anything with it afterwards, and kind of probably felt kind of like there's I don't want to explore that at all, so I'm just getting ignored it. So that's kind of how it feels. Um, Um, I do think it just again, once again, the somewhat violent imagery, the mine collapsing, and then the whole litter of pigs eaten alive. It's like, oh my gosh, okay. Uh, Cluny definitely is evil. So yeah, it really demonstrates how evil Cluny is, and like just kind of like he just doesn't seem to have any sort of like thought or care, and he's basically just a beast most mostly, or that he just operates on this kind of like just live and let live, dog eat dog world or rat eat rat world in this case. So very clearly, Clooney is not something to be what's the word, compromised with or negotiated with. That kind of really sets the tone for just how like Clooney ain't gonna compromise on anything. We're not headed toward like some sort of at least like, oh, maybe Clooney will even uh feign it. And that's kind of the interesting thing is kind of like we're gonna have a few villains that do the feigning thing, but Clooney is definitely the like one of the least like, no, I'm just gonna take what I think is mine um kind of mentality and just I will devour anything in my sight. Again, eating of rabbits, also in that previous group, and it's like there's just nothing to Clooney other than pure wickedness and evil. We're gonna have a few sympathetic villains, but we'll get to those, and we'll have a bit more at least slightly complex villains, but not much more than that. But Clooney is also going to set the standard for most of them, and most of them are just this, just pure gutlessness. Um, I find it interesting also because Clooney doesn't seem to really have like, despite his, I'm not saying he's never smart. We're gonna see him do some smart things later, but it's clear that he relies much more on brute. He's definitely more of a brutish villain um, as well. So, the dream, of course, this will be in a few villains is a common theme of having dreams that haunt them. Like basically their wickedness catching up with us. We'll see this a couple more times. There's going to be one where it's going to be the most evident, clearly. Um, and a couple more times. So visions and dreams and villains are almost always terrible and awful, and they're based on basically it's a a dream of repudiation of the villain. It's a dream in which it's like the villain is basically hearing in his mind, your comeuppance is coming, here it is. And so we have that with Clooney here in this opening. And uh, again, warrior mouse, clad in armor, very Um, we don't even have a face. He doesn't even have a face, which I do kind of like the idea that uh, the warrior is shaded in mystery, and it's like he's not even being told, hey, this is the one who's gonna kill you. No, it's this warrior mouse that you won't be able to recognize, and it won't be until um, very maybe later that he'll discover the truth of this. But in the moment, he has no truth way to discern what is going on. So that also is what makes the dream very disheartening for Clooney is the fact that like there's a warrior mouse by which he cannot discern. It has some writing on the sword that he also cannot distinguish. Again, um, kind of hiding the hero again in plain sight kind of motif, which is also a common motif. The hero hiding in plain sight. Um, that the villain will not be able to reconcile. That's a common motif nowadays in fantasy literature. So again, very there's it's kind of nice. I do kind of like he wakes up from the dream, but then it kind of goes back to him just mundanely getting news and stuff. I like that the dream. He doesn't say anything to anyone about the dream. The dream isn't really even after he wakes up. He doesn't kind of even really think about it. I kind of like that too. Is that this doesn't dwell on him. He doesn't really shake him from any real resolve in what he's doing because in part probably because he just thinks, oh, it's a dream, and B, he's not really gonna listen to this dream. He's not. There is some dream vision stuff in later books where that becomes important to some characters, but Cluny at least is not one of those. Cluny has no regard for any sort of spiritual or supernatural kind of event. Um, so um, there you are. Oh, so the other thing I wanted to touch on was kind of going back to all the revelations about Cluny. So the whole chapter is about like Matthias and Constance telling the abbot and everybody else, "Hey, we saw this horrid thing of this horde of giant rats and the giant creepy looking rat." Um, and every and of course because they think Cluny is the legend, the scoffing that's going on, and I'm like, wow, uh, boy, there's some badgering going on by everybody, not just Constant, but Mortimer and Methuselah. It's kind of like you're all so stupid. It's like, wow, okay, like that's some of the most condescending. There is some like avid authority going on later in the books, but it kind of feels like it's directed at certain people for saying specific people for saying very specific things. Here, it's just you're all stupid, and I was like, oh my gosh, wow, I don't like burn. It's like you are the, I like just the image. I've always liked the image of Methuselah in this chapter of just like pointing his little fingers, like you're all idiotic mice. It's like you doubt the rabbit. It's like wow, okay, way to lay it on there, Methuselah. I guess you have the age and experience, but man, come on, so little to me. I mean, after all, like whoever, like they haven't seen this kind of thing before. Like Abbott Mortimer makes like the point of just how peaceful the reputation of Redwall is, and it's like, and also like these stories, like give them a little credit, like there you have a good plethora of stories and probably even more than he listed. But it's kind of like even after a couple of stories like that, I wouldn't necessarily 100% believe you. I'd probably be more convinced, but uh, it seems like a lot of these stories are also very slightly exaggerated. I don't know. Um, Maybe that's the point. But the point is, of course, that they're true, so it's not an exaggeration. But it kind of just feels a little like, wow, you you couldn't pick like just even some of the more mundane things. No, you went for the whole mind story and the eating of pigs alive, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's something normal Colin has done that's just evil, normal evil. Like you have to pick the most uh wicked of his crimes. How about tone it down so you can transition them to the crazier stuff? Like I don't know, it's just really funny how that's all um thing. Also, one last point. How old is Methuselah? This is my last point, because this is really odd, because outside of the Badger age issue, there's not a lot of idea of that anything really outside of Badgers is hugely ancient. Now, there have been a few exceptions, but I found it like really utterly strange when it's like he's like Cedric, no, your brother, your Abbot Mortimer, and it's like it's like the new Abbot. He's like it's like almost like he's saying new in just in terms of his lifetime, because it's like I've seen so many of them come to go, and I'm like, man, wow, how old are you, Methuselah? Like, have you do you outlive badgers? Have you outlived a badger? Methuselah, it was just really funny, especially if you know just how long lived badgers are in the series. It's just really, really, really strange. Um, so yeah, uh, that's all I really wanted to talk about. Again, there's kind of just the build up going on. We're not really into the action yet, and so we're just building up this reputation of Cluny more again. Um, and we are the one thing that gets set up is that Clooney now has some kind of sense of something's coming for him, which is probably the biggest thing. Is probably that I would actually say that's bigger than the revelations about Clooney, because we know the audience knows about Clooney already, the reader. So I think that kind of revelation in just like Clooney's dream and then his kind of immediately dismissal of it, it's kind of like, well, we're drawing attention by both focusing on that dream and it's all the kind of details of that dream with the sword, the hiddenness, all that, but at the same time we're gonna move quickly away from that for a minute and we'll feel like that's a seed being planted that we're going to come back to other rather than a lot of these things just being so far chronological events that are just building up. There's this is something that's actually gonna come back. All right, there we are. There is uh, my quick overview and thoughts on chapters 5 through 8. If you have any thoughts or questions, I will also be sure to link to the Redwall book club possibly on some of these topics if you want to explore further. Um, Again, I don't agree with everybody on these topics, but it's at least discussion if you want to get into it. Um, I'm not. I'm just trying to let you know where you can go so you can dust these further and at least have fun back and forth, even if you don't all agree. Uh, so there you are. I will see you in 2 weeks next time, and hopefully we'll be getting into the real meat next time.